Welcome aboard. This is the Miles to Go podcast. And now here's your host, Ed Pizza.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Miles to Go podcast. Mr. Kerr and I are getting ready to hit the road, both in different directions, but we're going to take a few minutes to record. And as of time of recording, a little bit of an announcement, but not a lot of details just yet. We'll get into that in just a bit. We have a new / returning sponsor to thank and some fun stuff there. We're going to talk a little bit about travel craziness out there on the left coast, Mr. Kerr, and then sounds like you got a little bit of Marriott love. So a lot to cover today. And if time permits, we might even talk a little bit about the French because, why not? All over the board this morning. How the heck are you, man?
And I'm pretty good. A little bit under the weather here. But I've got the power of tea, honey, and some cough drops to get through so that I'm not just drooling all over myself here and coughing and hacking. And hopefully we get some clear airways before we get on the plane tomorrow. Because as you said in the pre-show, there's nothing better than clogged ears and nose and sinus pressure during takeoff, landing, and the 18 hours afterwards it takes you to get re-equalized just in time to get back on the plane and do it all over again.
Yeah, and that's the killer. It's like once you're on the plane and everything goes haywire, that whole rest of the day, you said it in pre-show. You're like, you can't hear, nothing feels right. Yeah. This road warrior life is sexy as all heck until you actually do it for 6 months, and then you're like, gosh, I have no idea how people do this for a living.
Glad I'm not one of them.
Yes, I'm glad you're not one of them too. So, a little bit of housekeeping stuff. If you want to find us, you can text us or send us a voicemail at 571-293-6659. He is at Kerr Points on all those social media channels. I am at Pizza in Motion, and we are on TikTok and Instagram as the Miles to Go podcast. We're going to talk a little bit about our Slack community in a bit because we've got some pretty cool pictures from a recent stay from one of our Slack members. If you do want to join, a few bucks a month, we'll get you all the Slack channels, our weekly happy hours, and our occasional meetups, which I'm still trying to cram into the very busy end of school year schedule. As you well know, Richard, it's a very busy time of year, although I guess you've just got sports, not necessarily all the school stuff, since you guys are still in homeschool world.
I don't know, man. I was in my elementary school that I am a proud, distinguished alumni from yesterday, teaching the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders of Hollis Hand Elementary School in LaGrange, Georgia, all about loyalty programs, man. And it was actually went way better than I thought because I have a hard enough time explaining to adults what I do for a living. And my class president, shout out to Miss Lindsay Isabel Morris, as the guidance counselor, puts on a career week, and she said, "Man, I've been following all your stuff. Will you please come talk to the elementary school kids about what you do?" And I said, "I'll do my best shot." I learned 2 invariable truths yesterday. Number 1, all kids in LaGrange, Georgia in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade know what Chick-fil-A points are. So that was my end to explaining loyalty programs.
Free nuggets.
And number 2, no matter what you're talking about, a 3rd grader will always ask you if you have a dog and what kind, which was questions that I got. But it was great, man. The kids had a great time. They loved the pictures, and mind blown when I showed them a picture of taking a shower on the Emirates A380. So it was cool.
From the shoulders up, right?
I was completely clothed. It just is a picture of the shower, not me in the shower. Let's be very clear here.
So make sure you get invited back to the school.
Yeah, let's make sure I'm not on any permanent watch government list for that, but no. It was awesome. So I hope some kids are excited about points and travel now.
Yeah, for sure. I've done that a couple times at my school, and it's always interesting to hear the questions that they ask. Now that we know that your class president listens to us, I think we'll just have to see if she can send in some embarrassing pictures of you. So.
She's not listening to the podcast, but I'll tell her to.
I mean, I have the picture your wife sent of me of you playing saxophone in high school. So I guess we could roll that up here.
We could do that. Thanks for bringing that up.
I'm here for you, man. You and Bill Clinton side by side.
Oh yeah, yep, one and the same.
All right, so
speaking of Democrats, let's go.
Dixiecrats, I think is the term you're looking for.
Yeah.
All right, let's get rolling. First up, a big thanks to Thrifty Traveler for being our sponsor again for the next handful of shows. We got some fun stuff coming up with them. It was actually, for me, it's been a busy week for them. I actually used 2 of the offers that have come out from them in the past week. One interesting one, not necessarily for me, but for other folks, because I'm a little bit too spoiled, but New Zealand round trip flights in coach from all kinds of cities for $800 round trip. And when I say all kinds of cities, I mean secondary cities. That's the toughest thing I normally see with a lot of the deals that come out. There are a lot of hub cities, Chicago, San Francisco, all that stuff. But this was $800 round trip from dozens of smaller cities. The 2 that I used, Amsterdam and Paris, 40,000 Air France miles one way in business class, which is clutch. November through April of next year. And then surprisingly, like this won't be around by the time this episode drops, but one that was a week old was available last night, so almost the time of recording. And there was a deal on Swiss to Zurich and Geneva, and it was 60,000 Aeroplan points or about 85,000 United miles in Swiss business class, which is a great product. And I was really surprised. There were a ton of dates available, and I was still finding availability a week later, last night, helping someone who wants to take a European trip. So,
but Ed, lots of cool points and miles are dead, man. So there's no way that there's actually still value out there. Or
they're absolutely dead.
Or is there?
So big thanks to Thrifty Traveler for sponsoring the show and for bringing those great kind of deals. There's a yearly subscription fee. We have a $10 discount off of that for first-time subscribers. Go 10 will get you $10 off your first year. And they put out, anywhere from, call it, 6 or 7 deals to 10 or 12 deals on a rolling weekly basis, depending on how many airports you want to look at. And there's some pretty cool stuff there. I find myself using it more and more, especially as airlines like Air France have really started to focus on the U.S. market, which you know from your day job. But focusing on the U.S. market, there's just so many more options. And for a place like Europe, once you can get there, I mean, easy to hop around via, low-cost carriers like EasyJet, and Ryanair, Wizz Air, and all that stuff, or take the train. Just bunches of options just to get once you're over on the continent.
Do not forget Transavia, the one that I used the last 2 years. Little Transavia, 1970s throw-up green interior decor, but it doesn't matter because you paid $6 to get around Europe. So get some Transavia in your life.
I have not flown Transavia yet. I have not.
Still have the ashtrays in the armrest in 2023.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. I like that. I like that a lot. All right, so let's talk a little bit of Slack community travel. I'm going to throw up a couple of pictures. One of our Slack members, Paige, was recently, and I hope I pronounced it right, she was recently in Algarve, which is south of Lisbon by, 3 or 4 hours. Most people think about going north from Lisbon to Porto, which, don't get me wrong, Porto's a beautiful place, but there's some unbelievably stunning stuff. And the original reason why I wanted to note this, and you see the sunset picture that she took here, but look at this cave picture, man. Tell me you wouldn't want to do a little cave kayaking for something like that. That is dynamite.
Yeah, and everybody listening in the car on your commute, I'm going to describe this to you. I'm looking at the inside of a gorgeous cave with 3 openings out into the blue sky over the crystal blue waters of the Atlantic Ocean, and it is quite unusual, stunning. Stunning, ladies and gentlemen, as we look into the cave.
I do think you have a career in voiceover because that was somewhere in between like QVC and
the Masters. I was going for the Masters coverage.
Exactly. I was right. I was trying to. Honestly, I was blanking on the commentator names. So
Jim Nantz, going for Jim Nantz there.
The beauty of the way your voice settled in there at the end, the dulcet tones of the morning dew on the Augusta Green.
CBS, if you're listening, I will need a job in another 10 years. Please hire me.
I think there is a possibility that Nance is still calling the Masters in 10 years. So.
Yeah. I mean, Vern Lundquist, he retired this year, and he's almost 90. So yeah,
I know.
A while ago.
So the reason why I thought this was interesting was she stayed at the Pine Cliffs Hotel in Algarve, and they apparently have a residences side. Though I couldn't find award stays when I plugged in a couple of dates, but for if you're not looking for a residence, because she had like a 2-bedroom residence, which looked, which sounds like a great option there. But I'm seeing tons of award availability for what I would consider to be pretty reasonable prices. So
what program is this?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Thank you, dummy. Marriott Bonvoy property. And so a standard room, 2 twins and a balcony, 41,000 points a night for spring and fall dates. What was interesting about this property too, which I think, is great, was they had base rooms that were, anywhere from like €60 to €150, depending on the date that I checked. And then on top of that, you could pay 40,000 Bonvoy points to upgrade to a suite. And there were some pretty nice suites with, big balconies and plenty of extra space and stuff like that. So just some interesting flexible options for that property. I think you and I talk a lot about Marriott, and you're going to talk about them in just a second. I don't find a ton of like unbelievable deals in the Bonvoy program, which is why I don't spend a ton of time looking at it. But for an area of the world that I think is very beautiful, being able to stay for as little as 40,000 Bonvoy points a night, and or using, call it $100 cash and 40,000 Bonvoy points to get a suite, I'm going to call that a really solid Bonvoy redemption. What do you think, Mr. Kerr?
Yeah. Holds to one of the universal truths of U.S.-based hotel programs is that outside of the U.S. is where you can get the most value, in my opinion, compared to in the U.S., because that costs the same as what I just paid for the Columbus, Georgia Marriott for the night before a little race I'm doing this summer, where it's jacked up sky high, and paid that many points for, Columbus, Georgia versus going to Portugal. So I vote Portugal.
Well, let's talk about the other Marriott redemption that you had, which I thought was a pretty sweet deal.
Yeah, and so did Twitter, apparently. My most liked tweet of 2024 so far. Scrolling through the Marriott Bonvoy website, because actually time of recording tomorrow, I'm going to, as a hosted guest of my partners in Marriott, Bonvoy moment at the NFL draft that they have in Detroit tomorrow on the 25th. So I was looking through and I saw what I thought was an auction, right? Because for a lot of these Bonvoy things and all the programs, they do auctions and you see a starting price and you're like, oh, that'd be cool, but I know it's going to go for millions of points versus what's listed here. But they actually have kind of recurring tickets at the Marriott Suite in Wrigley Field in Chicago, home of the Chicago Cubs. And the Braves are going up to Chicago at the end of May, and they had 2 tickets for a total of 55,000 Bonvoy points in the Marriott Suite, which is all included food and drinks. And my son and I are about the biggest Braves fans that there are, so looked at flights real quick, looked at award availability for hotels, and man, I was like, this is a great deal. So I bought it, man, and it's $29 to fly Frontier up, and we got 2 seats in the Marriott Suite for the Braves at the Cubs. And I'm like, 55,000 points, again, total, not per ticket, but total for 2. That's pretty solid value right there, man.
Yeah. I hope you booked an extra night so you can take them to Navy Pier and maybe all around Chicago a little bit. Great city for kids. Great city for families, in my opinion.
I think we're going to make a little Kerr family outing up to Chicago for 2 or 3 nights.
Oh, the whole Kerr family and nothing but the Kerr family. Is that what you're telling me?
$29 on Frontier. Like, let's go. Everybody get a seat.
Yeah, I like it. And in true podcaster fashion, I did forget. So one of the new things that we're trying to do when we feature stuff from the Slack community, $25 Visa gift card to help Paige with future travel for sharing those photos with the audience. All right, so I want to do a quick Disney recap too before we dig into the couple of topics that we got today. My son and I did a 48-hour trip. It was kind of funny time because Randy, the guy who started Boarding Area where I have my blog, he texted me a story that was in the Wall Street Journal about people who do day trips to Disney from other parts of the country. Somebody who took like a 6 a.m. flight down from Philadelphia, did the day in the parks as annual pass holder, and flew home. We went a little bit longer than that. We were 48 hours on the ground, but I used Disney Vacation Club points, which you and I both own and rent out. These were super clutch because I got a cheap room at Copper Creek Villas, which is sort of like a subsection of the Wilderness Lodge.
They have cheap rooms there?
It was 15 points a night. So
yeah, that's a pretty great deal.
Not as cheap as the 10-point Boardwalk Villa rooms, but since this was a fairly busy weekend, so they had all the races going on, and it was Dapper Days where people dress up like rolling 20, stuff like that. So it was definitely busy. Hotel rates were no less than $400 a night. So to be able to score a room last minute via DVC was clutch for us. And I don't think he's a viewer or listener of the show, but if he is listening, a shout out to our buddy Justin, who we met on Star Cruiser, because my son got one of those true once-in-a-lifetime experiences. He's a huge Indiana Jones fan. I have to keep reminding myself that my son's only 13 because he's taller than me now, but he's still a kid at heart, loves Disney. And so Justin plays Indiana Jones in the Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular at Disney World. And so we flew down, had a little fun time with fellow Slack members, Marty and Mike and Sway. And then he got to be on the set behind the scenes for almost an hour, walking around the Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular set. And he was like super stoked. Justin gave him a shout out when the show started. And then he got to walk around and, play with everything, hold Indiana Jones's whip, the whole bit. It was one of those once in a lifetime, super awesome, cool experiences. And I'm very thankful, Justin, for doing that for us.
Sweet. Love it. Thomas loves that show too.
Oh, yeah. It's funny short story. Apparently, Justin, before he worked at Disney, he was down there as a kid and saw the indie show and loved it. He went to go work to be as Gaston. That was his first job at Disney World. And they went over to go see the indie show when he started working there a handful of years ago. And the guy who was performing indie that day was the guy he saw when he was a kid. And he's like, man, I got to get over here. This is the reason I'm here. And so that indie trained him on the indie show. And we found out in sort of a weird sort of twist of fate that indie was also, he was playing Jack Sparrow. We looked through some old pictures. Back in 2015, when my son was like 4, he got pulled up on stage outside Pirates of the Caribbean for a pirate show and got to do a sword fight with Jack Sparrow, which turned out to be Justin's indie mentor. So pretty cool little moment there.
Is there any place for Quasimodo in Indiana Jones? Because that's the only thing I'm getting cast for. So you let me know if that ever happens.
I was thinking more like paint the face green and go Shrek, but whatever, man.
I could be Shrek. Yes,
you got the hair for it.
Good point. Let me know when Shrek's in Indiana Jones. Yeah.
He did get to hold Indiana Jones's whip, but as Justin was so quick to point out with us, he's like, "Yeah, if you use the whip, I'll get fired." So we did not get to test the whip. So it was a pretty cool little experience. Go ahead, bite your tongue. Bite your tongue.
Got a lot of jokes I'll just hold on to.
It's a family show, Mr. Kerr. It's a family show. Come on, dad jokes all around. All right, so let's talk about California.
Oh, goody.
We are, and I think it's worth noting that we are fairly apolitical on this show, even though this is a political topic. It is very much travel oriented. And as much as you and I complain about Clear and how the advent of all of these status matching programs and free Clear status with top tier status on the airlines has led to a fair amount of friction for us, we're not really sure where to go with the fact that California legislators have proposed legislation that would ban Clear in airports because it's not fair that some people can pay to get ahead of the security lines. Mr. Kerr, I trust that you spent your morning polishing up your soapbox. I would like you to take the stand now and speak to the people.
I just want to remind all of our Miles to Go listeners here, everybody take a deep breath. Don't run for those 1-star reviews because we said the word politics here. It'll be okay. And let's just look at this from an objective point of view. So here's the quote from Senator Josh Newman, a California Democrat and sponsor of the legislation, said Clear effectively lets wealthier people skip in front of passengers who have been waiting to be screened by the TSA checkpoint. Quote, it's a basic equity issue when you see people subscribe to a concierge service being escorted in front of people who have waited a long time to the front of the TS line. Everyone is beaten down by the travel experience, and if Clear escorts a customer in front of you and tells TSA, sorry, I have someone better, it's really frustrating. Now, that is certainly an opinion, because I will tell you, as an avid Clear member for many years now, I cannot remember one time where I've been escorted in front of people because you are in a separate line. So just from a factual standpoint, he doesn't understand the Clear experience of how it works. And number two, I can tell you, in my home airport of Atlanta, TSA PreCheck is shorter than Clear the vast majority of the time. All of that aside to say, I don't think this guy understands how Clear works. Is this really the number one pressing issue for his constituents of whatever district Josh Newman is the state senator in? There's nothing else that he needs to be worried about than the airport experience for the average American that travels once or twice a year. Maybe. There's got to be somewhere else to put your efforts, and that is the hill I will die on this particular issue. This is not something that you need to be worried about. Go make your constituents' lives better. The end. That's all I got.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, maybe to avoid those 1-star reviews, if you haven't gone around and clicked, is that there is a Republican congressperson in California who also has said that she believes she may support the bill. So I think this is a situation of our politicians not really understanding the full scope of what Clear does. And I think you did a good job noting that. I think you and I have talked about this on the show in the past, that we actually don't think Clear is going to be around a whole lot longer, especially as TSA is moving to more photo biometrics for PreCheck. And I've gone through this test in LA, I don't know, 3 or 4 times over the past 2 months. And it's very streamlined. Walk up, they take a picture of my face, it clears me, and I'm through, no pun intended. So
Delta's doing that by themselves in the Atlanta airport now. I'm actually flying Delta tomorrow for the first time or second time this year, and I have the Delta digital ID, which allows me to skip ahead of both PreCheck and Clear. So I hope that these people would want to, ban Delta being able to help people get through security faster. Ultimately, because the TSA is not very good at its job, and we have, privatized companies are coming up with better solutions, is what this person is saying. So if you want to ban Clear, then I guess we need to ban Delta as well from the airport, since they're also letting people skip the line.
I mean, in fairness, there are airports I wouldn't have a problem banning Delta from, but that's a completely separate story. And maybe it's just the sheer number of Delta elites that I want to ban so that I can actually get a complimentary upgrade once in a while.
Oh yeah, I'm flying to Detroit, so it's hub to hub tomorrow. Check-in should open here shortly. I expect to be number 83 on the upgrade list tomorrow for the 757.
I would take that. Yeah, I would take that math. Are you in an extra legroom seat at least, or
I am? I am in an exit row. Yes, I am.
All right. Well, it's not horrible.
No, not horrible.
All right. So last topic, unless we get time to talk about French air traffic controllers, which are always fun to talk about, but we're going to be a little bit light on info on this one, just because this is literally getting ready to launch while you and I are recording. So I might try and do a little bit of a deeper dive later and post some screenshots of some stuff, but we are officially at the point where the Mr. and Mrs Smith integration with Hyatt is launching. And so I went through a little webinar with them last week, got to meet the founder of Mr. and Mrs Smith and hear about their vision. But this is in the wake of Hyatt losing the SLH partnership, and then IHG losing the Mr. and Miss Smith partnership to Hyatt. And we talked a little bit about last week, and I said a little bit vague about the SLH property. So one of the nuances here is that some of these Mr. and Mrs. Smith's hotels are also SLH hotels. So there's there's a decent amount of crossover. So we may actually see some of the SLH properties return to the Hyatt fold here at launch. I'd say there's two key things to note, and I would say you could certainly look at the first one as a positive or a negative. The second one, I would say is net not great. So first off, from a positive or a negative standpoint, while we're not 100% sure because we haven't seen pricing yet, Richard, it's been confirmed by Hyatt and Mr. and Mrs. Smith that these will be, to some level, a dynamic pricing chart. Well, actually, not even a chart, dynamic pricing. We're not sure what it's based on yet at this point, but what that means is these properties won't conform to the typical Category 1 through Category 8 levels. It does mean that more room types will be available because it won't just be based on standard room availability. But, as you and I have seen, sometimes that sort of pricing can, like in the Hilton atmosphere, can lead to, some pretty wacky prices at times. So the other thing for us to talk about as well is the fact that at launch, there won't be any guaranteed breakfast benefit for globalists. Sort of similar to how they're looking at SLH, they want to try to streamline a package of benefits for all Hyatt elites at all Mr. and Miss Smith properties. A lot of the Mr. and Mrs. Smith, that's a lot harder to say than it should be. Mr. and Mrs. Smith properties do come with certain amenities, free spa time, stuff like that. So it's a little bit of a different breed. I'm going to take a breath there and get your first opinions.
Yeah, it completely meets expectations, because if you go and look at some of these properties, like there's no way that you can just put these onto an award chart, right? Some of them are islands that come with butler and chauffeur service. Some of them are just far off. Like you can't standardize that experience. And the only way that it would make sense in my head is some sort of revenue based program based on how much that hotel room costs, right? Even when you think about it from the business side of the hotel owners being reimbursed by the World of Hyatt program, like a chart based on average daily blah blah, the usual thing wouldn't work. So they had to figure out something special here. Until we see the pricing, I'm optimistically hopeful that something makes sense here where you get a little bit of outsized value. Like I'm hoping around 2 cents per point if we're being crazy to cover these, which other programs do, like the Accor program does it. And I mean, Hyatt's been overly generous in some of their experience pricing where it's greater than 1 cent per point. So like you said, this completely meets what I had anticipated. And when the pricing goes live later, I'm sure we will talk about it on next week's episode.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about it on next week's episode. Like I said, I may try to put out like a mini short with a couple of screenshots for folks. They did share some redemption numbers with us. As you'd imagine, they were tailored to sound really awesome. So there is some stuff that's going to be affordable for regular members, that don't have like massive point balances, to Richard's point, on the islands and stuff like that. I was trying to find the quote and I can't find it while we're sitting here talking. So I'll just try to paraphrase it. One of the things that was in the release from my Hyatt contact that I think is an important point to note is that they really do see this integration differently, and that it doesn't change their Hyatt philosophy on offering defined benefits to members in terms of keeping properties in categories. That they see Mr. and Mrs. Smith separately, and that they don't view this specifically as the next step to dynamically pricing the entire portfolio, similarly to how Hilton and Marriott have gone. And I think, you and I have been in this business long enough to know that none of this stuff is permanent, but I think that was a good thing to hear as part of this release.
I was actually impressed when I read that quote where it said they went out of their way to call this out because they figured it would be speculation on the media's part. So, yeah, good to hear that as well. But look, man, even if it is a lot of Hyatt points to get, some of these, like you just have to, everybody listening, go scroll through the Mr. and Miss Smith portfolio and look at some of the properties they have. If some of those are even obtainable on points, period, even if it's a lot of points, I mean, holy moly, man, there could be some amazing vacations out there in some folks' future.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and same as you, like I know we're Hyatt homers, but I think it was really telling that they decided to call this out, because I think a lot of programs are specifically ambiguous about this stuff because they want room for the future to be able to make changes. And it's not to say that Hyatt can't make a change in the future. We've seen the introduction of peak and off-peak pricing, but I think they've been very thoughtful on how they move through all these things, and I think they're very thoughtful here to include the quote that, hey guys, just because the Mr. and Mrs. Smith integration is very different from everything else doesn't mean that we plan to make this change everywhere. The last thing I'd note on Hyatt is if you do have an Amex card, there is a pretty nice Amex offer for their all-inclusives right now. $750 in spend gets you $200 off your next all-inclusive stay. So definitely be checking your Amex offers for that if you're in the market for one of the Hyatt all-inclusives. I should have asked you this as a good podcaster before we started, but did you bring your pennies, Mr. Kerr?
I did bring my pennies, yes.
All right. Well, before you get to your pennies, I'm just going to share one small thing too. It always marvels this belief that we have that, to your point, of like points and miles are dead. My buddy Lauren, who I keep forgetting, you met Lauren. Yeah, you did meet Lauren. I know. Yep. So my buddy Lauren, she's on her honeymoon. We helped her book that honeymoon. The French air traffic controllers decided tomorrow would be a good day to strike, which means she can't fly from Venice to Paris. Got on the phone with the folks at Virgin Atlantic. I'd booked some really affordable tickets using Virgin points to fly in Air France. Virgin rep very quickly helped me change to a flight the next day with no fees at all. And then now it looks like we're going to reroute her into London so I can spend a day in London and then come back to Paris. The prices on flights right now for what's left are sky high. So if you were changing, you'd be screwed. If you could find something on your existing airline, you'd be flying a day or two later. If you were trying to buy one of the last remaining seats on one of the existing flights, you'd pay a fortune. And I paid nothing to make the changes. So points and miles again to the rescue.
Vive la France.
Vive la 4-day work week for French air traffic controllers.
It's brutal. I mean, that's a good point. Again, you guys have been listening to the show. The Kerrs do off-peak Europe the last 2 years, and we're going to do it next year because the strikes start spring, summer, and it can turn London, Paris, Amsterdam into disasters. And I just am not going to mess with that off-peak Europe life. That's what we keep doing.
I watched. It was funny as I was dealing with it this morning. I was watching flights into London quickly creep up in price over the course of about 45 minutes to an hour because everybody that couldn't get into Paris was now booking a London flight. And I can imagine that Channel tickets for tomorrow went from whatever $150 a piece to $600 a piece. So
brutal.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Kerr. I think I'm going to take the rest of the episode off and let you throw some copper on the counter, man.
Yeah, the Final Two Pennies. This is my debut of the closing segment of the Miles to Go podcast. Very first one.
I got my popcorn. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, maybe I don't know what people are expecting here, but this is just really something I wanted to remind people of. And again, if you're probably a diehard Points and Miles fan, or maybe you're a new listener to Miles to Go, but I want everybody to step outside of get their expert cloak off, get their expert mindset, and there's a forgotten card out there that is not recommended the way that it should be. So, ladies and gentlemen, listening to the Miles to Go podcast, when you are recommending a card to your neighbor, your friend, your coworker who is not going to be a Points and Miles expert, who does not want to go like ass over tea kettle doing this stuff, you need to recommend the Amex Everyday Preferred card. This is a card that I held about 10 years ago and we used it as a family. It is a one card solution for the average family. So let's go through it. $95 annual fee, very palatable to the average American. There is a 0% intro APR offer for 1 year on purchases and balance transfers. If you do have a coworker that needs to get out of some debt, which actually pretty rare these days for the cost of borrowing money. 3x points at U.S. supermarkets, 2x points at gas stations, and 1x point everywhere else. However, if you use the card 30 times per statement period, all of those are bonus 50%, which turns into 4.5 points. 4.5 points at supermarkets, probably after rent or mortgage, the largest cost for your neighbors, your coworkers. 3x on gas stations, and then 1.5x on everything else, which is just like the Freedom Unlimited that everybody loves so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, when somebody asks you, hey, what credit card should I get? And you start reaching for the usual go-tos, please do not forget the Amex Everyday Preferred card is probably an amazing solution to that family or coworker for the one card they need to use every day.
I love it. Mr. Kerr, you've done the Two Pennies proud. You have your first time driving. I think it was absolutely excellent, and that's you always use the Final Two Pennies to call out something, and you have called out something for the folks who are the beginners. And as you and I both know, most people don't need or want 5 credit cards.
No,
so
give them the one card that they need, and there you go.
Start them off simple. Well, I will also share with you one more detail before we go, because you're smart enough to figure this out. I got an email today, Mr. Kerr. I got an email, and the subject line was, "Your Aeroplan 25K status starts now." So what does that mean?
Did you get a spontaneous match? Or a little gifted trial? Little elite status trial gift?
Or it finally happened. And
you got approved for the card?
I still haven't gotten the approval for the card yet, but I apparently have Aeroplan status, so I think I got it. Even though I haven't gotten the card approval yet, it says, as one of the many perks of being a new Chase Aeroplan card member.
Love that you get that before you get the official card approval. Does this mean the $1 million quest is on? Does this mean we're starting that? I
asked my wife about it this morning. I said, "How much do you like the kids, and how much do you want to be away from them?" So she's currently thinking about it. So the $1 million spend is now possible. We'll talk a little bit more about that next week. But until then, I really hope that your sinus pressure goes away. I've got a quick spin out to Vegas and back before the week ends, and I'll be cheering for you for your Nashville race. Or is it just Emily?
Oh, I'm not running a marathon. Mrs. Kerr is running her first and probably only full marathon this Saturday. So the kids and I they're driving up from here. I'm flying from Detroit down to Nashville to be there at the finish line. She goes 26.2 miles. That is a lot of miles, man. We'll be waiting at the finish line either to congratulate or pick up the pieces. We don't know which one yet, but best of luck to Mrs. Kerr and her quest this weekend.
Yes, I am rooting for her in the Music City Marathon. Was lucky enough to watch my wife do a handful of marathons over the years, and man, they're just brutal. They're just brutal. Be ready with the bags of ice, the bathtub, and whatever she wants to eat when she's done. Be that good husband I know you can be.
Oh yeah.
All right, safe travels. Enjoy the draft. Enjoy Music City. I will hopefully be a quick trip to Vegas and back here, but until we upload again, we've got miles to go. Free nuggets.